What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Best Self Blueprint. For those of you who haven't tuned in before, let me tell you, the mission of this podcast is to either by myself on solo episodes or with amazing guests like today's, provide you with knowledge, experiences, and insight that help you move the dial towards becoming the best version of yourself, whatever that means to you. So the guest today is someone I've had the amazing fortune of meeting a few months back. We've gotten to sit and chat about life for hours. I've actually gotten to do an energy healing session with her. Her name is Ruane. She is an intuitive healer, soul practitioner, published author, published musician, so many amazing things. But above all else, she's such a genuine human being. And I resonate so well with people like that, whose energy just radiates with authenticity, positivity, kindness, and she's just an amazing person. So again, she is all of the things: writer, musician, business owner. She's the founder of and sole practitioner at Luke's Atirna Healing. Hopefully I pronounced that right. You'll hear her say it correctly at the end of the episode. But she has so many great things just about helping other people. And so I'm so excited for you to learn from her, hear from her, and just get to know her a little bit. So without further ado, let's get into it. Episode 97. All right, Ruane, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me here, Trevor.
It is my pleasure. I've been excited about this since the first minute we got introduced. So the first thing I want to start with, because this is a topic I think can never be covered enough. You say one of your highlights of your life is listening to the quote unquote nudges you receive and courageously saying yes to them. So it's kind of a two-parter. How do we know when we're being nudged, and why can it be so difficult to say yes?
Those are fabulous questions. To me, when I get a nudge, it is not about the noisy, hey, you have to do this, you have to do that. The nudge is typically the quiet little whisper that comes typically after, you have to be quiet in order to hear it. The noise of ego and fear and the I should do this, I should do that, that easily drowns out the little nudges. So to take the pause and to listen and to get curious about what's going on. For example, like I started my Reiki training because I got divorced and I was looking for ways to heal. And my nudge came in a flyer for Elmbrook Hospital. And typically like I get those and I just toss them right away because I'm like, well, it usually covers like geriatric care or baby care. And I didn't fall into either of those categories. But lo and behold, I looked and there was a thing for Reiki training and I was like, okay. So that was a nudge, like something inspired me to open that flyer and I did, and everything unfolded from there. So it's quieting myself enough to get curious about what's underneath all of the noise. And the courageous to say yes is typically because there's risk involved. When I finished my training, my Reiki 1 and Reiki 2 attunement, like I didn't do that with the thought that this was going to be a profession. I did it because I was curious about me. I was curious about what was going on. There was something about Reiki that spoke to me and I was like, I just kind of want to check it out. And then I got another nudge that said, you need to do this for other people. And I was like, oh, no. Like, that's not part of the game plan. I'm way too messed up. I'm way too messed up. I have too much stuff on my plate. I have too many things to sort through. And the nudge came back. That's exactly why you're perfect for this. And I was like, whew, okay. So that was a big risk to say yes to that, because again, after divorce, working on a piano teacher income, maintaining a house. And I thought, well, how is this even going to be possible? And so I stepped into the Reiki master work. And then it was, well, you need to make more room in your schedule for clients. And I was like, yeah, but the piano income is consistent. It's predictable. I know what's going to come. And then again, that little nudge said, well, you're never going to have more people if you don't make room for them. They need to know there's room. And I was like, oh, hard logic to argue. Like that's very, very true. So there was a risk in when students, piano students would leave, graduate, whatever the case may be, to then just condense my schedule and not fill that space with predictable income and to open it for the unpredictable. So those are just some examples about the onset of this, of my work, and the courage it took to say yes. And I learned to stop questioning how and simply said, okay, if this is what you want me to do, okay, if this is my nudge, guide me, show me where I go next. And it just continually invited listening to more of the nudges.
Yeah. I think to go back to your point too about that's one of the funniest mental traps as a coach to get into is that sense of, well, I'm not perfect in this, so who am I to tell other people? But there is something to be said about the person who's working through it being the best mentor.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you are, I mean, you should truly, if you're coaching people, be further than the person is.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of power in someone who can accept that imperfection around what I like to call the becoming of it all, right? Like you're infinitely becoming. And that's the best part about it is you don't have this ego in guiding and sharing with the people you're helping. Now, for the people who have listened to the nudge and gotten beaten down by life, what's your methodology for gaining trust with the nudges? Because especially with best self, and it's still, I believe, I'm just getting started. I still believe it's kind of one of those. The best way I can explain it is, even though I've been doing it for years, every next evolution, it's like, oh, now I'm just getting started. But
Yes.
it is this constant understanding of just because you surrender doesn't mean you're going to land on candy clouds and life's going to be great all the time. Usually there's a lot of brutal tests that are still involved in the path. So for
Mm-hmm.
people who get dissuaded because of the lessons that are placed within the nudges, what's your advice to them?
First of all, I want to completely congratulate and align with the whole idea that the next evolution is always like the next starting point. It is that point of like, oh, so we've got this stuff behind us, and now here's the next door that we're going to walk through. And it does constantly feel like a rebirth, a regeneration, a new outlook to whatever it is that lies ahead. And I also very firmly agree with some of those lessons can be really, really brutal. And it does, I will often refer to it as like pity party, table of one, now serving Anne, to like
Yeah.
give myself permission just to be like, you know what, feel the feels. Like that is rule number one for me. Feel the emotions, feel the anger, feel the fear, feel the sadness, whatever is there. Because if I don't acknowledge all of that, it's only going to continue to get in the way. So it's important. So part of my methodology, as you said, is to give myself permission to feel and learn from the emotions, because the lessons are the external activator for the internal lesson. And that's really, really important because so often we're taught that the lesson is outside of us. We think about school and we get the lessons when we're in the classroom and, all of that, but it's the internalization of it. It's understanding what that impact is on the inside. And for me, it's largely emotional. And it really is for everybody. And understanding what the emotions have to teach. Like I have learned that anger is something I don't like to touch, but I've come up with an acronym for it: another new growth experience revealed. So when anger comes to the surface, it's like, okay, what is it here to teach me? It's no longer something I'm like, oh, shame on you, Anne, you shouldn't feel anger. It's like, okay, it's here to teach me something. I've learned that fear comes up when I'm hitting a limiting belief. Like when fear tells me you can't do this, it's like, is that really true? Like what old belief is there that is triggered or getting activated by whatever response I just got from an external reaction to me. So that is a huge way that I explore that. And I explore my feelings either through journaling or being out in nature or giving myself space to return to the quiet, to return to the nudges and go, okay, well, I'm obviously not fully ready to receive the next step. So let's do that inner work to prepare me, because it's important, because each step does take us to that new level of personal trust, personal growth of going, oh, okay, well, this is coming to me because there is that sense that I can do more. And so I need to get rid of all, like, not get rid of, understand and learn from the things that are preventing me from knowing the true depth of what I have within me. Like if I'm getting a nudge, there's obviously something within me that is responding to that. That's like, yes, let's dig a little, let's get curious, dive in, clear away the debris. What is the next place that is there for you? But I'm going to go back to that pity party. Like I give myself permission just to be in the space and be like, oh, that was brutal. And just let that be real, because that has to happen, and that place of inner exploration to move forward.
Yeah. And that's such a good point about the choice between curiosity and judgment within oneself. And it is difficult. It might even be impossible to do both simultaneously, to where the easy choice and the almost automatic reaction is judgment, especially just with the setup of culture nowadays. Just like how our social interactions go is very quick, reactive judgment of self and other. So to create that gap, to convert that judgmental energy into curious energy and play that emotional jujitsu within yourself, it is fascinating. But the thing that I just kind of laugh about at this point, and this is something that popped up during our session, was feeling feelings is a skill nowadays. And maybe it's always been a developed skill, but as someone who is in the gym doing strength training, trying to get stronger, trying to build my endurance, feeling feelings is a muscle within yourself that, like you said, journaling, meditating, having not surface level conversations, but really leveraging emotionally intelligent people around you to be a soundboard, to access that surrender and to feel it and integrate it. It's just hilarious to me how, and this is probably my bias, but I, for a long time, viewed it as, oh, you should just be able to feel your feelings. But it's a muscle that's developed over time, to where you talk about the whispers. I feel like your internal emotional compass starts as a whisper, but the more you allow it to be heard and the more integrated it becomes, it goes from a whisper to a conversation. What are your thoughts on all that?
Well, I love that. The whole idea that it goes from a whisper to a conversation, and really learning to feel our feelings. I would have to say that I was like 30 years old before I even named a feeling, because I was okay all the time. And okay for for everybody, not a feeling word. It is a culturally acceptable way to answer the question, how are you? I'm okay. Okay, super. On we go. Like we did the perfunctory, this is where we are. And so we learn through those exchanges that, that perfunctory okay is a really safe space, but it's not the truth of how we're doing. I mean, how many times have we even said to somebody, are you okay? And the easy answer is, yep, I'm good. And off we go. Like I did my job. I noticed something was going on for you, and I kind of felt uncomfortable asking. So I couched it in what felt safe for me. And the response is often then couched in what is safe for the person receiving the question. And that's where that risk comes in too. And that space of curiosity, because it's risky to say, tell me what's on your mind. That's a whole different conversation than, are you okay? And so that opens that door. And so when there is that willingness on both parties to trust the vulnerability of exploring the emotional landscape and exploring the depth of what's going on, it strengthens that muscle. It strengthens that place of going, it's okay for me to give voice to how I'm feeling. It's okay for me to say, Trevor, I'm really struggling. I'm finding myself kind of like in this loop, that's telling me that I can't do this. And to lay it out on the table and then to open that door for you to hold space and to either ask more curious questions, but it is a muscle and it has to be one that is a choice, one with awareness to say, I really do want to know you. I really do want to have that conversation with you. I want to know me. I want to know why it is that, I'm stuck in this cycle of spinning and spinning and spinning. And I know I want to move forward, but I can't figure out what's getting in my way. And to be able to have a conversation with somebody, to have that sounding board, it really is diving into that emotional landscape and developing the muscle. And sometimes it's pretty easy, and sometimes it's like, yeah, that didn't work so well. But to avoid letting that didn't work so well be the be all end all, go, okay, well, I gained this, awareness about myself that I get really nervous and my heart starts to race if I ask someone, tell me a highlight of your day. But all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm worried about whether or not I'm enough, self-judgment. Am I enough to be with whatever question or whatever answer is there? Will I be able to receive that in the same space and share in joy of that highlight? Or am I going to feel jealous because I don't have a highlight to share, or I wish I could do something different? So there's so much learning that we do every day that we can easily miss out on.
Yeah, and something that stands out to me, I mean, what's really funny about this was our very first conversation ever, was the discussion of hilarity around that automatic, how are you? Good. How are you? Good. And then you both just dip out, as opposed to really taking that as an opportunity to genuinely connect.
Mm-hmm.
And in my session with you, again, a lot of realizations came from that. I felt like I was a child at Christmas energetically after that. But one of the big pieces, to your point, was I am someone who realizes the power that comes with a relationship of two people that have that connection contract of, when you ask how I'm doing, I have the trust in you to truly answer that adjacent with where I'm at and in line with actually what's going on, not some facade or white lie or however you want to blanket statement that.
Mm-hmm.
Those to me are the closest relationships, are both parties willing to at all times come authentically as who you are, because who we are changes all the time as well. That constant becoming who we are, where we're at, what we're dealing with, positive or negative,
Mm-hmm.
and trusting that the person will receive it, hold the space for you. And those can be rare relationships.
Agreed.
And,
Agreed.
and I think the final part is the person being, again, emotionally equipped to hold the container in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
Because I love a few of my friends who they're the greatest people in the world, but emotionally they're just not at the point where they hold the container in the right way. They'll
Mm-hmm.
respond with a joke that maybe doesn't need to be said in the moment or certain things like that. And so the if I were bold enough to put a formula on it, I think it's both parties being willing, both parties being trusting of the other, and both parties having put in enough work to have the emotional quotient to be able to facilitate that
Mm-hmm.
relationship.
Mm-hmm. And I would even add to that too, um, that the part of being authentically ourselves, sometimes there is a notion that being authentically ourselves means that we have to be like happy all the time. And being authentically who we are can be like, I'm kind of prickly today. Like, know that I'm not I'm not going to be able to receive the joke that you want to share, or what, whatever the case may be. And so that our authentic self, much to what you said, is constantly changing. In every single moment, it's constantly changing. So if I send you a text and say, oh, you know what, I'm just really frustrated with whatever, in 10 minutes, that text may be like obsolete and completely different. And something may have happened, shifted that, an awareness or whatever. And so to really be in that space of truth about the fluidity of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And then that adds to our ability to hold the container and to have those, to have that emotional landscape with another person, and to know that that it's also okay to say, I don't have the capacity right now to be with you. I want to support you. And the most I can do is sit with you. And that's a beautiful space of authenticity and holding space and freeing myself of that, any kind of judgment, to be able to not have the expectation of like having to know the right thing to say, or where do I go from here, or what do they want from me, but to be able to say, I'm here to listen. And that's the best I have to offer right now. And to know that that's enough. And to let that also be a very authentic part. That authentic doesn't have to be perfect and ideal. And, it's being real with what's going on inside. And that's, adds to everything that you just, shared about how to have those connections.
Right. So speaking of connections, this kind of leads into my next piece, and authenticity. What most people, so here, let me read this. I feel like I didn't write this correctly. What most commonly disconnects people from who they authentically are. So you were in the prompts that I asked you about, you were talking about one of your main passions being reconnecting people with their self.
Mm-hmm.
I take that to mean their true, aligned, authentic self. So
Mm-hmm.
what do you see in modern life most commonly disconnects people from that self? And what are a couple 101 strategies to start that reconnection process?
Well, in our culture, there is, and with social media, God bless social media. it serves a purpose, and it also serves as something quite detrimental, because then it sets a status, and whether or not that status is accurate, but it puts up a front like, oh, look at this amazing meal I had, look at this amazing vacation I had, look at this amazing house I have, look at this amazing relationship I have. And it sets this status quo, and it's really easy to get trapped in comparison, and to have the perfect job and make the perfect income and have the perfect everything. And if we get trapped in the external, that easily takes away from the connection inside. And, going back to what I was sharing about my career choice, I left safety, predictable, and all of that to step into what feeds me. And so I am definitely outside of the mold. Like, I felt that, so passionate about that. And it's hard to come back to that place of what's true for us, because we've forgotten who we are. We become the roles that we fill, instead of the truth of who we are. Because if you're a marketing manager, well, then that's like the mindset, and you have to be thinking about what other people want, what are other people going to buy, what's going to make them do this, and then our mindset goes there, instead of remembering that the truth of what inspires us, like what brought you to that point. You could still be an amazing marketing manager and be completely aligned, going, I know it's important to me, and I'm not going to try to buffalo people into buying something or doing something because that's my job. I'm going to do it from a space of like, I know what's real, and this is how I'm going to approach what it is that I do. And even from like my books, there was this whole idea about getting a marketing manager, and I'm like, no, because my books don't fit the stereotypical marketing mold, and I will not take the time and the money to find somebody, a marketing person, who can come to this place of not wanting to try to schmooze people over to buy my books. Like, there is an authentic calling in my books. And if you respond to it, then the book is for you. But I don't want to be some quick fix. Here's this. If you follow these books, your life is going to be amazing. Maybe yes, maybe no. You need to read the book and then do what the book invites you to do if you choose to. And if you don't choose to, that's okay as well. So we're always faced with choices. And when we find ourselves unhappy all the time in what we're doing, like if the rat race just makes us unhappy, then it's that invitation to pause. What is making me unhappy? Do I not have enough time for myself? Do I not have enough time for my family, for things that I love? And to get curious about where that displeasure is coming from. Is it the work itself? Is it the pressure? Is it the need to meet the next sales quota so that I can get the next bonus so that I can make sure I can make my house payment on my house that's way too big because that's what society, promotes that I have to have. So it's knowing what's important to you and living your life and what is important to you. And, for those who have spouses and kids, that's a different place of pressure because there's a different financial responsibility. And you can still take the pause, get curious, and figure out ways that you can make choices, even if they're unpopular choices, because most of them are, to make those choices to come into alignment and go, you know what, I don't need to have all that extra bonus money. I am going to work my 40 hours and then I'm going to take my downtime and be in nature or take a vacation or have a weekend away and to be willing to do what fits for you and know that you are making a choice for you and not be so concerned about the judgment or reaction from other people. I think
that last part is a big part, right? Is that ability to detach from the response of others. Mm-hmm. Now, for me, I've found a decent cadence of reconnection between my daily reconnection with self is meditation and exercise. Exercise, I just find a nice groove where I put on my big, beefy, over-the-ear headphones and tune out the world. And it gives me, sometimes I'm not even listening to music. I just put them on to create the solitude I need to just think. And that ability to, you and I both know all about energy and moving energy. And to me, when I exercise, it's a great opportunity to be thinking about these things as I'm moving energy and releasing it. And just that sense of getting time to be with myself as the energy is fluid and moving to think about these questions, right? Like the bigger questions of life. And then in meditating, that's almost where you get to listen to what your head is saying and not try to fight the thoughts or analyze the thoughts, but just observe what is actually going on. But then stepping up, it's okay, every month getting a day to myself or a day to do a more elaborate practice of energy work with a coach or going into a float tank for 90 minutes and doing more elaborate things. And then the big one is I try to once a year go on a trip where I'm by myself and I'm going somewhere I've never been around people I've never met. And that ability to simultaneously go on an adventure, but also completely disconnect from the shoulds, right? I should be going here. I should be doing this. I should be saying this to these people at these places. And to just throw the shoulds out the window as far as you can and have that time to really, I call it disconnect from the world to reconnect with yourself. Mm-hmm. That's what works for me. But I think, again, our processes are as unique as our fingerprint of what allows each individual to do these things. Are there processes you found that generally help people start to reconnect?
Well, I agree with you completely that they are, whatever our process of reconnecting is very unique to each of us. For me, I too have my daily routine that includes, taking my dog out, which is which is in and of itself really important because he's got quite a personality and he has an opinion of where we're going and when we're stopping and when he's going to sniff and when he's going to roll. And that's a like it's a brilliant way for me to start my day, to be like, remember, I don't have full control in this moment. My job is to respond to what is happening. And he's such a brilliant teacher that way. Like if he wants to stop and check out something in the tree, it gives me pause to listen to the birds or to look at the tree myself or just to take in being in the moment. I also use the phrase like disconnect to reconnect. It's like I unplug to, unplug from everything else to plug into the moment that I'm in. And so, walking my dog is the first way of my day to really go, oh, I have no control in this moment. I am sharing time and space with this other living being, and we both have an idea of what this is going to look like, and we get to compromise. So it automatically teaches fluidity and allowing and just letting things be much more malleable, and this not doesn't have to be um, and then I will do my stretches and my yoga. And I love doing my yoga simply because it gives my body the ability to expand, and I get to pay attention. I get to notice what she has to say. If she's a little bit creaky in spots, to just give breath and to remind myself that I have that choice to bring breath into my body, that I don't have to constrict further because of whatever is going on in my body, that I can embrace where she is and go, okay, I'm hearing you, and let's work together in this space. And I always refer to my body as she and not it, because she is my vessel. Like she is that place of all good things. And so I do need to pay attention and be united with her and not just live in my head all the time. So yoga is a powerful way for me to reconnect. And then I tend to start after, before I dive into work, I will take time and journal. And my journaling looks different. Like journaling is a practice in and of itself. Sometimes it's gratitude, sometimes this is what's on my mind, sometimes this is a dream nugget, sometimes it's I'm really struggling with this, and so sometimes it's a deeper dive of emotional stuff. And without fail, it's always asking for support. Guide me through today, help me listen to you, help me listen to what's going on within me, help me be the vessel that I am called to be, and help me really bring my best self, whatever that looks like in any moment. And so that is how I make a point of connecting with myself every single day before I dive into my work day.
Yeah, I don't think it's worth dismissing for people that journaling, meditating, exercise, stretching, so many freaking people have promoted these things. It's like if you're in a rut, and I speak from experience, when I'm in a rut, usually I'm not meditating, doing some type of gratitude practice, exercising, journaling, reading, or the last big one is like really connecting with people, because that's another one that I've found throws me off my energy game. Is, don't get me wrong, I love solitude. I come home, I go in my room, I listen to podcasts, I hang out. But no matter how much of an introvert, ambivert, extrovert you claim to be, genuine, vulnerable, transparent connection with people that you trust and care about is some of the best medicine. That it's as close to free as possible. Maybe you need to pay your cell phone bill so you can send them a text to go hang out. Maybe you need to go purchase a cup of coffee while you're out. And that goes back to our conversation of being intentional about developing those relationships, because life's pretty hard sometimes. And if it's like the Ferris Bueller quote, like it moves fast, and if you don't look around every once in a while, you'll miss it. You'll also, I think you won't just miss it, but you'll drop the ball on people that you were really close with, that you weren't intentional about reaching out to. Their life got crazy, your life got crazy, and now you're two ships passing in the night. So just being intentional about these pretty simple practices is, to me, very, very important to create the difference between just being alive and truly living.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And there is a huge difference in being alive versus truly living.
Yeah,
Very
I mean that gets into our session. I was in a rut where for a while I was on that side of it almost felt like I was living as like a puppet where I was doing all of the things Trevor would do. I was working, going to the gym, hanging out with the people, but I think the way I explained it to you is I felt emotionally unplugged from the experiences. And there is just such a it it's almost like the spiritual equivalent of when you're used to eating healthy food and then you go on like a junk food run. You just like the whole experience of life is noticeably different. It's that dialed to 11 when you're spiritually and emotionally unplugged because no matter what you do, like you said, the external output is there's this brick wall experientially between that and the internal emotional spiritual experience. And so doing the work, and maybe you can talk on that of your work as an energy coach, a Reiki coach, of like, and this is coming from someone who's usually pretty good about doing those little things. And it's still really easy to slip into a funk of not surrendering emotionally, trying to like grit the teeth and go through life in that masculine energy of do, do, do. What experiences do you have with the coaching side of that, of just people trying to out grit life itself and do all of the things that need to be done? And eventually, you grit so hard, it just that emotional, spiritual plug pops right out.
right. Well, and out grit, I love it. Like that. There again, so much truth in that sentence. One of the first things that I always do in a session with clients is when the hands-on starts, I start at the feet. And that is all about bringing awareness back into the body. When we find ourselves like in that space of emotional, spiritual disconnect, we're disconnected from our bodies and we're busy in our head. We're planning, we're doing, we're planning, we're doing, thinking ahead, trying to control, like all of the stuff. And so, and that too is part of our culture. That's the way it is. It's like we're celebrated for being for how busy we are. And oh, well, I got this and this and this and this. And like our culture just celebrates this constancy. And it's backwards. It's so backwards because we're not connected to anything. We're just doing, and it's mindless doing, and it wears us out, and then we're tired and bored and like I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. And it's like because we've disconnected from who we are. So in a session, it's always starting at the feet, and I will ask so many times in the course of a session, what are you noticing? What are you noticing? Because it's bringing awareness back into the body. And if someone says, I don't feel my body, and I said, that's a really powerful awareness. I'm not about to scold somebody for that because it's equally important to be able to say, I'm not noticing anything. That in and of itself is awareness. To be able to say, man, I'm so in my head. I have no idea. I can barely feel your hands on my feet. And that, again, I celebrate that because they're being vulnerable. They're being willing to say, I am so busy. I know nothing. And then my next invitation is always to return to the breath. I don't tell them to breathe a certain way. I don't say, inhale for 4, hold, like none of that. It's just like bring your awareness back to your breath and notice your breath, because in and of itself, that is a really um, telling aspect of us. Is our breath shallow or deep? Is it restricted or free? Do we feel like we are getting a full inhale and or a full exhale? Like our breath is a massive barometer that we choose not to pay attention to because we're like, oh yeah, well, I'm breathing, I'm still here. And it's like, well, yes. And our breath, like if we're like and like feeling like we're panicking all the time, well, that's a huge indication your body is trying to tell you that something needs to shift in that moment, be it just to stop or to take a breath or to remove yourself from a situation. Maybe your body is responding to some anxiety or fear about a room you just walked into and something that's there, or maybe it's an activity you need to step into. And so our bodies are such brilliant teachers. And when we give ourselves permission to notice what's going on in the head, but pay attention to our bodies, we get a landmine of information. It's like this treasure trove. It's like, oh, there's this nugget, and there's this one, and there's this one. And so even if a session with a client lands on me being at the feet for like the majority of it, that's a lesson, really well spent to get that person in their body and understand. And then, I will continually ask those questions. What are you noticing? And I'm just as happy to hear what is being, shared, what they're noticing in their head as well, because that's equally important. If someone is having difficulty feeling what's going on in their body or noticing what's going on in their body, and they're like, man, and I'm just so irritated that I can't feel my body. It's like, okay, that's important. That's important information to know that there is self-judgment about how this is unfolding for you. So, so sessions are so much that place of reconnecting is really about reconnecting with our body, because that's where all of our answers are. That's where our heart nudges are. That's where our emotions are. That's where our intuition is. That's where every source of wisdom and knowledge that we have been gifted is contained in our bodies. So within the work, the energy work, it really is about returning to the body, reconnecting with your body, because that helps you reconnect with who you are.
Yeah, it's definitely worth, we're getting into it enough that I think it's worth kind of diving into my session with you. Everything that you said is like, yep, that happened. Yep, that happened. Yep, that happened. So as soon as we were done, I sat in my car and I just typed out notes, because I like to make sure. I've done a lot of these sessions with a lot of different coaches. It's pretty easy to tell when is a session worth really like trying to remember the details, and when is a session more, it was like, okay, that was a nice little like hour relaxation, but nothing that powerful came from it. This one, and I think you could tell from my energy popping up off the table at the end, it was surreal how different I felt afterwards. But when you were talking about, just to walk the audience through a little bit, you were talking about you start at both feet. And my fun little game I play with myself is, like I said, I've done a lot of these sessions with a lot of different people, is I like to almost test the practitioner a little bit, where I'm like, I do notice something. I want to see if they notice it, right? And so I remember like almost right away, and I ended up telling you about it. I got this really powerful visualization when you grab my feet, of almost like we'll say a black backdrop, and on the right side was just really condensed energy. And it almost looked like, as you started doing whatever it is you're doing on your end, the energy started, like, it was like particle energy that started flowing over to the left. I didn't tell you this yet, and you made the comment like, all right, you're obviously very stuck in your masculine. And you said the words, like, all of your energy is on your masculine side. So you started saying, like, we're going to start working through like moving it over to the feminine a little bit. And so that's where I was like, okay, she's got her finger on the pulse. So that's when I started bringing up like, oh yeah, like this is the visualization I was having. That was the first piece. What do you feel when you have your hands on the person's feet? So like with this, and you can feel the energy is shifted. Is there something that you're feeling, that you're noticing on the feet? Like what is that process from your perspective?
Well, and that's an interesting question, because that too can vary from person to person, depending on the energy of the person and what it is, where that fluidity is. Because sometimes I can identify it as it feels like dead weight on one side versus like um, overcharged. And sometimes I call it kind of like the sparkler, like the fireworks, where it's just like, and it's just like staticky and busy. And it like, wow, okay, there's a lot going on there. And so So it really is very dependent on the person and the energy that they're carrying in there. Um, and I mean, there's a part of me that almost doesn't know how to answer that because it is so in my hands and so not of my conscious thought, because it's a sensation. It's the connection, it's the energy connection. And so that doesn't always equal like a mental thought connection because, um, I mean, even in my training, we heard all the time, take your head off, everything comes with your hands. And I mean, and I don't recall a time ever overthinking like in a session. Like it has always been my hands and the words that come out of my mouth. Although I sound like me, like we're having a conversation, sometimes it feels like I'm getting nosy about your life, but it's because of what is coming through my hands. And I'm not thinking, oh, I need to, ask Trevor this. It's a matter of like, it just like, whoop, it comes out of my mouth and there it is. And so it's very sensate, and depending on the individual depends on how I would describe that. But sometimes it can feel like some dead weight, sometimes it can feel like a concrete block, sometimes it can feel almost sandy and non-existent, like it's almost just like there's no presence there. It just almost feels like it's like, oh, there's particles, there's something that is waiting to be put together. So um that's the best that I can answer.
The reason I'm curious because I've told you about, and I don't know if we talked about, but I mean, ever since I was a baby, I've always been very busy with my hands. So like a lot of my friends, like I'll do this a lot or do this or like kind of like just like fiddling with my hands. And what I told you is something that I've always very much appreciated about the Trevor life, the Trevor experience is this spidey sense of like the energy kind of going on around me. And I think part of what settles that and clears it is this like fidgeting with my hands almost.
Mhm.
And so that's why I was curious as someone who does energy work through physical touch, because the difference between me and you with that, I mean, I'm sure there's a ton of differences, but for me, I need to be like moving my hands. Like I'll finger tap a decent amount. I need the energy to move. And what was a kind of beautiful yin to my yang energetically was you were so calm and still with your energy. And like when you would place your hands, it was just like a very light touch, very centered, very calm. And it was like that's to the point where I wrote in my notes, like her just putting her hand on my feet, it felt like kind of like unstoppable force meets immovable object. Like my energy that is just this crazy bounce off the walls, never still, met its counterpart of like, and maybe this is part of that healing and the energy that you're able to bring is it just felt so like, hey, you don't have to bounce off the walls right now. Like let's just chill for a second. Let's sip some lemonade and hang out and have a good time. And that to me, that's why I was so curious of like, what's your perception of it? Because I'm sure yours is different than mine and different from other healers and all of those things. But then another very noteworthy thing, and I don't know if I think you'll probably remember this, is for probably a month leading up to this, my shoulder was twitching like randomly and pretty frequently. And I remember us getting into some more deep conversation around just me holding back my excitement and passion for talking about the spiritual realm and the woo woo things and all of this because of my fear of that like glazed over look that you'll often get with people who don't share the passion for it. And inherently, that playful, passionate energy around it comes from the feminine. And so there was all of this energy just freaking out on my left side. And I remember you said something along the lines of just giving me permission to not hold back my radiant energy
Mhm.
out of feeling like I'm going to come off as anything to anyone. And you made this like swooping motion with your hand. And it, again, something I didn't say until after, I could feel like a dump, almost like a dam opening up of energy come down and out my left hand. My shoulder has not twitched since then, which is like,
Yay!
again, logic brain Trevor is like, oh, well, there was probably a muscle that when she put her hand there, relaxed it, and blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, it's not like you like acupressured my shoulder. You just put your hand there,
Mhm.
guided me through some stuff and pushed it off. So like when you experience a client going through something like that, what's your emotional reaction to an experience like that?
Well, I do recall that experience with you. And I remember when I had my hand like on your shoulder and both of us, it was very apparent that your body was like, thank you. Holy cow. Oh my God. What is all of that? Like there was massive big energy that was there. So I totally I have a very clear recollection of that whole moment and when it all moved. Um I do, more of that comes my reaction isn't about me doing something for you as much as the joy of you having the revelation of what is meaningful to you because that's where the gold is for you to have whatever revelation it is and then that's usually what brings a smile to my face where I'm like that's your nugget that is like that's what you needed in this moment so it's nothing to do with me but it is the joy of you or another client having that that realization because sometimes I can feel something and like I can feel a big shift and I might say to a client did you notice that and sometimes they're hesitant to say no and my response usually is it's okay if you don't I said it's more important that I do like like it's not your job to feel all that I'm just because sometimes like as with you to notice it and to be able to kind of dive into it a little bit was exactly what you needed and so sometimes my point of curiosity with the client if I feel something big like that is to open the door to conversation and if that door is still closed for them that's not a bad thing the energy is still going to do what the energy needs to do the release is still going to happen and it just simply means that that wasn't where their nugget was for that moment and that's all well and good but I really um I find it a beautiful point of connection between me and a client when they receive that nugget, when they receive that moment of like, holy, that was it. Like that, yes, that makes such a big difference because it usually is a mindset shift that happens with a physical shift that is connected to an emotional shift, connected to a spiritual shift. It's like all of the stuff. And when that moment comes and it's received by the client, it is magical. It's magical. And it reminds me of the power of the work that it's beyond me. It is not of me at all. And to be able to facilitate that with another person is I don't magical is the word. Like that's really all that's what I've got. It is just it's a really profound, beautiful moment that is um it's just like that right there.
Yeah. One, it is so, again, in retrospect, understanding now the cadence at which you would move. So you always had two hands somewhere, right? And so it's so interesting the cadence and almost storyline from the session of where your hand placement was as we went over each topic of conversation
Mhm.
was the most divinely perfect hand placement for each topic because so that the feminine energy blockage, which was obviously happening in my shoulder, I mean, as we started talking about that, you moved the hand to the shoulder, and then you had one hand on the shoulder, one hand on the chest. And I remember it was as you moved to the chest, you noticed like, oh, anytime I'm talking about one of these things that instinctual reaction is to hold back, I would inhale and then hold. And you were like, feel free to breathe out whenever you're ready, by the way. And just that was perfect placement at the perfect time throughout, like, again, what I'll call the story arc of everything. And then after the blockage of not holding back and letting Trevor in all of his energetic expression go run and play.
Mhm.
I almost, this sounds kind of weird, but I think of the words frolic in the field. Just go let the energy frolic in the field. And then the next topic, as we shifted, you shifted to one hand on the chest and one hand on the neck, or like, yeah, like top of back neck area. And this was it, as weird as it may sound, the experience I had was almost like being a little kid again. And it's like, you don't have to worry about anything. Like my spirit self was just being like cradled for a minute as we dove into the more childhood stuff. And I've done a lot of digging into exactly what we did with just when were the times that I felt most aligned and free and all of this. But the perceptual shift you gave me in terms of not just when did I feel good, when did I not, when was I in my masculine and when was I in my feminine, and when were those most integrated was something I've never explored to that depth. And so as childhood Trevor is resurfacing, that spiritual cradling of like, you're going to be okay to come out and feel the feels and think the thoughts and review all of these things. It was just so divinely perfect in all of the physical interaction, the energetic interaction. And the last piece that I just find fascinating about this, I mean, no, that's not true. There's 20 other things, but I remember at one point discussing, I don't know if we discussed it or if I just visualized it, but the like kind of spirit animals or like the spirit guide animals. So one of mine is I still haven't determined if it's a hawk or an eagle, but we'll figure that out eventually. But it's a dominant flying animal, we'll say that. And I have kind of my totem, I guess we'll call it, is a wolf, a bear, and an eagle or hawk. Well, today, driving here to do this podcast, and this, like, I thought was crazy, crazy. So usually hawks don't get that close to cars, right?
Mhm.
There was a hawk that was flying over and like swooped down next to my car and then flew away. And I was like, I will be kicking myself if I don't remember to mention that to you. So just the fact that the spirit animal sentiment is something that I haven't really taken a deep dive into, like really reconnecting with the traits of each of those animals. And the fact that now we're circling back to dive into you and this session and all that you do. And that animal flies right up next to my car. I was like, all right, universe, I see you. I see you.
I'm listening. I'm listening. Yeah.
Right.
A great book for the spirit animal stuff is Animal Speaks by Ted Andrews, just as a point of reference. Great book. It has all sorts of animals and it has their totem energy and whether or not it's your spirit animal, even if it comes across your path, you can look it up because like I had an opossum in my yard hanging out in the hedgerow for like a month. And that's not typical opossum behavior. And then I looked up the energy of the opossum and I'm like, oh, yep, perfect timing, perfectly makes sense. And the last time that we saw the opossum, when I was walking with Topaz, like he just stopped and he like the opossum ran up the bush and Topaz just sat there and stared at it and the opossum stared back. And it was like this really divinely cool moment of like, okay, you are giving me your final message right now because I've seen you like running and hiding and doing your thing. But this was the first time that there was like absolute Topaz is seeing the opossum. I am the, like, and it was like this space of safety. And I found myself talking to the opossum because, well, that's what I do. And I was, I'm like, thank you for being here. Thank you for your message. And it was like, and I haven't seen it since. I have not seen it since. And I had, a really important meeting 2 days later. And I was like, I have received you and you have been supporting me in this month preparing for this, for this meeting. And it was, so I love that you saw the hawk this morning. But I do want to go back to the hand placement aspect as well, because one of the things about when I work with clients, and I say this especially in the first session, I will let you guys know that I will start at your feet, and where I go from there is completely dictated by the body. It is not me choosing. It is not me deciding. You can tell me that you've got shoulder pain, but I may not even go to your shoulder. Like it may be, manifesting, and presenting itself in the shoulder, but it may be something else. And so it's like, it's completely 100% guided by, your body or whoever is on the table. And the thing that I find very interesting about that as well, because obviously I can get on any side of the massage table when I've got a client. And it's always interesting to me what side I'm guided to go on. And like when I think about your shoulder, when we did your shoulder, my masculine side was on the triggered part of the very stuck feminine energy. So it was bringing balance into that. So even where I'm guided to like physically put my person, not only like where to put my hands, but and even if I'm doing, knees are places where we tend to hold ego, pride, resistance. And so it's very fascinating because without fail, usually my left hand will go on the right knee and my right hand will go on the left knee. And that because it's like countering that masculine, feminine energy and bringing a different balance to it. And it's not always that I have both hands and both knees. It could be a knee and, a hip or a foot or whatever. But so it's very fascinating, even from this space, because again, I don't think about that. Like my hands go where they go. I move where I move. Like it is not, it is totally not conscious thought at all. I don't go, oh, should I be on the right side of the table or the left side? Like I do not, I just am like, oh, I am going over here and this is what I'm doing next. And so it just really brings that exclamation point to the energy and the exchange and how alive and palpable that is. And when what can come from that place of allowing and surrender and connecting to energy, mental energy, emotional energy, physical, all of it, putting it all together. So I just thought that was a fun nugget too, since it was such a feminine energy thing that was stuck, just to point out, oh, by the way, it was my right hand that was very intentionally back there, because I could have been in a different position having my left hand, at that shoulder spot, but it was my right hand that was there.
Yeah, my session, it was like, we're going to need to spend the entirety on his left side. Like that is the plan. He needs all the help he can get on this feminine side. But yeah, it is. It's such a fascinating thing because of the fact that the logic brain holds no weight in that realm. Like there, and from someone who I do toggle kind of back and forth between those worlds because, and I'm sure you have found this as well as someone who you do own your own business. So there is you know, the scheduling and all of the business back end things that require that like kind of masculine to-do lists type energy. And so the logic brain, in my opinion, holds a lot of weight in some aspects of the human experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are some aspects of the human experience that you can logic as hard as you want for as long as you want, and you will go nowhere. Like you will learn nothing because logic doesn't play a role. And it makes me start to think about for how long things were considered magic because the science wasn't caught up to it. And it just brings out that inner child in me thinking about all of the things that right now are considered woo woo or pseudoscience. And it's like, part of me kind of is like, give it 30, 40, 50 more years. There's going to be a lot more coming out that makes us go, oh man, I thought there was my logic brain couldn't wrap my head around it. It's like, well, that's because your logic brain wasn't playing in the right playpen on that one. It's a whole different arena.
Right. Well, and that too goes to the whole place now, flipping back to the conversation where I was talking about marketing. That whole idea. It's like this, like, there's a reason why traditional marketing doesn't work for this kind of work because it is not something that you can put the logic brain to and be like, oh, well, this is what happens. And logically, I can tell you it's no. And so it really is like you've just got to let your curiosity lead you and go, okay, well, I'll give it a shot and see. And because it's true that there, like, logic is there's no place for it because I, there's no conceptual plan that happens when a client comes in. It's just like, okay, well, here we are. And it is. I love that you keep like referring to like the playground and the playpen and just allowing that because it is allowing for that space and the joy of exploration. Like when we're kids and we let curiosity be our guide, we don't care if we're drinking out of a hose or whatever. It's like, well, I'm thirsty and there's a hose and there's water and I'm drinking out of it. Like that's my solution to the situation. And it's like and it's play and it's curious and I wonder what's over there and I want to climb the fence and see what's over there and that is like a really powerful way to approach life is to remember that we do get to be kids in it. And even when I come and have to like do problem solving and strategic planning for something, I don't tune into my logic brain. I let my kid curiosity brain be like, okay, so what are options here? And just let some of like whatever is there. And some of them are kind of off the wall. And it typically is the off the wall ones. And I'm like, that's brilliant. I'm like, my
Mhm.
logic-y self would not have come up with that answer. That's fabulous. I might need to like tweak it a smidge to make it like something that I can implement. However, it's that curiosity play that really was the solution. And it's like, oh, okay. So yeah, no logic. You got to table that every once in a while.
Right.
Like, so
Well,
just
and that was probably there were a lot of very powerful takeaways from my session with you. I think the biggest one was just the kind of putting up in front of my face how much I've pushed away the surrender to just that playful side of myself. Because anyone who knows me well will tell you that is me. Like I am the stupid dad jokes bouncing off the walls like that. That's my authentic energy.
mm-hmm.
But life sometimes, and it is a trap that I myself fell into of, oh, now's a time to kind of put the play to the side. We'll get back to that. We need to work and we need to grow and we need to do all this. And it was just that permission I needed to like, you can work hard and you can be productive and you can do all that stuff and not act like a grouchy old man doing it. Like you can do all of that and play and be light and say the funny stupid dad jokes and do all of those things integrated within each other. And then the other one is like just the permission to really like the best way I can think about it is like go full fuck yes, where it's like you don't worry in the slightest about how you're being judged, what the other person's response will be, and being willing to look a little crazy to the wrong people
Mm-hmm.
because inevitably when and I've experienced this myself many times, which is why I always find it comical coming out of a lull where I like forget it or don't practice it. But when practicing authenticity in its truest, most radiating form, you'll find those other people that want to be in that space. And then it really actually is like kids playing in a sandbox,
Yeah.
building their castles of life together.
I love that. I love that. Yes, it's so true because it's like attracts like that energy, that light, that whole space of like, oh, because life it's not easy for anybody. Like at any given moment, there's a something that you're like, oh shit. And like you're facing with, faced with something that you didn't want to face or you didn't plan for, didn't anticipate, whatever the case may be. That's how life is. Like we, as humans try so hard to control every aspect so that we're on top of it. But really life is like it is unknown. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what question you're going to ask next or where this conversation is going to go. I don't know what's going to unfold. Like I don't know anything. I can't control anything. I can say, "Oh, well, I know that this is what my thought is that I might tend to today," but life is full of unknowns and we try so hard to control it that we forget. We forget that we don't know anything aside of this very moment. And then when we allow ourselves to play and build sandcastles and let all of that joy be together, we don't have to be perfect. The wave can still come and knock down our sandcastle and be like, oh, that's okay. I'm going to help you build yours because yours is still looking pretty great. And we can come back to mine later. And, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It can be messy. It can be fluid. I mean, I think about when I first started doing, putting some piano stuff on YouTube, like it started during COVID and I started doing live things on Facebook. First of all, just to like fill my time because, well, it was a lockdown. What are you going to do? My mom's not on Facebook and she's like, oh, well, I'm on YouTube. And I was like, what? You're on YouTube? I'm like, that's great. She's like, can you put that on YouTube? I'm like, well, yeah, I can totally do that. And so it started there. And then I decided I was going to do Christmas stuff. And then we got Topaz and Topaz has been very involved in my piano playing since we got him. I've never, he's a golden retriever, loves to sing when I play. And at first I was like, oh, I can't have you like jumping at me. I can't have you doing this. And that's not going to be perfect. And what's going to be on YouTube? And oh my gosh, and I like got all in my way about how perfect everything had to be. And now, like 5 years later, Topaz is loved on my YouTube channel. I continue to do daily Christmas things, and people like they may enjoy my playing, and people will comment on like enjoying my playing, but they love Topaz because I mean, he Snoopy's it. Like he had back like full blown singing, and sometimes it's barking, and it's always appropriate with the music. And that's what people love. They love that real time connection, that real time play. And I will laugh and I will, because it makes me giggle. I don't teach him that. Like that is his talk about authentic self. Like he just lets himself respond to the music how he wants. And if he gets distracted by a squirrel at the window, guess what? Off he goes and he will stop mid woo woo to like go look out the window because that's what caught his attention and that's where he is in the moment. And so it's that permission to be messy. It's permission to not know the answers. It's permission to let your sandcastle like get knocked over by the wave and be like, oh, but that was a pretty kick-ass wave. Did you see how it crested over the top and crashed? And enjoy the process instead of getting bent out of shape when it like does something that is unexpected or unplanned.
Yes to all of it. So, okay, I want to start to wrap up by asking you about one of your core beliefs, but everything you just said, I took your core belief and turned it into just a little quip in my head because I think we live in just this absurd duality between us being infinitely more powerful than what we believe we are. That's one part of the duality. And the other part is being specks of dust on a floating rock, hurtling thousands of miles per hour through infinite expanding nothingness that we know nothing about what's outside of it. And somewhere in between there is whatever we can think of life being. So I think just this aspect of, to your point, like, you can devote your life to obsessing over obtaining knowledge and skills and wisdom and influence and power and whatever arena you want to go win and play. And yet there is infinitely more beyond that. And there's infinitely more within that no matter what path you choose, We're all just specks of dust on a rock hurtling through space. So, okay, so all of that to just go on my little tangent, but I'll bring it back. So, one of your core beliefs is, and I quote, that we're more than we think we are. What do you mean by that?
We get trapped in limiting beliefs. We get trapped in them. And I think about what my life has offered just in 2024 alone and um, facing a life changing event. I'm getting divorced. And in the midst of that, I still recorded and produced a CD that was released in March. I started a membership. Thank you. I started a membership page called Nuggets and Nudges for Knowing Your Enoughness on Patreon to help continue the exploration and doing more deep dives, which includes me doing videos, which scared the crap out of me because I'm like, really? What do I have to say? Well, apparently I have a lot to say. So that was a whole step into something completely different. I composed, recorded, produced, and released a second CD in October, and um, and I got myself a part-time job to help supplement so that I am able to step into whatever this new chapter is going to be, whatever it is going to look like. And like all of these things, I'm like, I had no idea. And, continuing to work with my clients, which just fills my soul. And like all of the things that I do in terms of like social media things that I put out there, even the YouTube stuff that I continue to put out there with Topaz, and just all of these places that it's like I never knew I had the ability to go, okay, well, these are all aspects of my life. And this one life-changing event doesn't have to upheave it. I get to choose how I respond to that moment. I can let it swallow me or I can use it to serve me. And I have like continually used it to serve me. And every time I'm like, wow, and I've been doing cold calls for, other job opportunities. Let me tell you, not in my comfort zone. However, now I'm like, oh, it's a piece of cake to be like, oh, hi, my name is Anne Ruane, and I would like to discuss with you how my skills and experiences will serve you. It's like, what? Whoever thought, like, I never in my wildest dreams would have imagined that would be something I'd be comfortable doing. And, like the first one, I just about had my heart in my throat and I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this. Like I read it off of a piece of paper because I was so nervous that I was going to screw it up. I'm like, ah, but now I'm like, here we are. So I am continually being shown through like since the beginning of this year that I am more than I think I am. And it was the limiting beliefs that I can't do this and I don't have anything to say and I'm going to look stupid in a video. And what if I and make noises and 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 whatever. And it's like, who cares? Like that's a conversation with me. All of that stuff happens. I trip over my words. I forget things. Whatever. That's me. If I want people to connect and know that I am real with them, they get to see the real me. And that was so huge to step into that in that platform. And and granted it's only $5 a month, but I was like, am I really going to charge people $5 to hear me and what if I don't know? And it's like, oh, and so like this huge shift in I do have information to share, and the people who it connects with, they're going to come and they're going to learn, they're going to engage. It is going to be this really beautiful community. I've started doing workshops and sharing deep dives into things like journaling and emotions and forgiveness, and again, things that I didn't necessarily do before, but like this life-changing event was this massive nudge of be seen for who you are. And I am seeing that I am so much more than I ever gave myself credit for. So instead of like waiting for people to find me in my in my little cozy Pewaukee corner of doing energy work, is like, put yourself out there, let people see you, let people know, and to be seen for who I am, that I don't have to be perfect. I can trip, I can forget, I can do whatever. And that makes me real to people. That makes me accessible because that's who I am. So that core belief has been my North Star this entire year.
Yeah, it is. To your point, that's well, you had a lot of points, but to one of your points, I think that's one of the skills that's unlocked when you develop that muscle of feeling your feelings is, and I even noticed this last week, it crept up. emotionally, there's like actual physical fight, flight, or fright.
Mm-hmm.
I think emotionally there are those same things. And I'm in the emotional freeze bucket, like fright, like just paralyzed.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that feeling of like, oh, I more than usual don't want to get out of bed this morning. Like there's something that's like making me emotionally put the hands up.
Mm-hmm.
And just that sliver of awareness unlocked the ability to think about and analyze like, okay, what's going on in this area of my life? What could be causing it? Where, like, how am I feeling about this? What am I feeling about that? And it gives you that ability to feel the actual feeling itself without letting it bleed into other areas of life. And
Mm-hmm.
so that is such a powerful piece is there is I don't necessarily want to call it compartmentalization because it isn't that as much as it is the understanding that the energy of this thing doesn't need to influence the energy of other areas of life. Like let this experience be what it is for this area and still enjoy the blessings and gratitude and abundance that comes from the other areas that are they're not affected by it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
whatever the harmony is of all of that and not Heismaning the feelings, like actually letting yourself feel them. It's such a multifaceted, I always call it a game because to me it is like, this is all one big game. We've had that conversation, like the Joker, why so serious? Um, but yeah, so I really wanted to highlight that. Now, you've talked about your Patreon, you've talked about YouTube, you've mentioned your books, all of the stuff. I will put links to all of it in the show notes for people on YouTube. It's down here. Um, but I'll give you a couple minutes. Just let people know because again, you published author, published musician, energy coach, all of these things that you're doing. Who do you think listening to this should reach out and where can they find you to connect, to keep up with what you're doing, to book a session with you? The floor is yours for all of that.
Thank you for that. Um, so, in my most, I'm missing the word, um, the truest place that I can say for people, to reach out, if this resonates with you, reach out. You know, all of us have more we can learn about ourselves. All of us have hidden treasures that we haven't gotten to yet. All of us do. Every single person who walks the face of this earth has more to discover and learn. And if now is that time for you, and now is the time that resonates with you, follow the nudge. Follow the nudge. And that goes to the name of my business, which is Lux Aeterna Healing. And Lux Aeterna is Latin for light eternal. And there is a lot of great intention about it being Latin and light eternal because we all have a light within us. And when we step into revealing and moving away the stuff that's like the debris on the path, we come to that place of light. That light is inextinguishable. Even if we think that life is pummeling us and, knocking us down and, whatever the case may be, that still does not put out our light. Our light is still there. It's still burning. It is still waiting to be discovered, waiting to be seen, waiting to be utilized, waiting like it's there. It is absolutely always there. And so there was great intention in choosing the name of my business that I did. So I have on my business page, luxaeternahealing.com. And you can find quotes and questions, points of exploration. You can find information about my books and CDs there. All my social media connections are on that page. Scheduling an appointment is on that page. So all of it is there. And if, driving into Pewaukee, if that's a drive for you, distance healing works as well. So energy is energy. It transcends time and space. So just as there's energy exchange between Trevor and I during this podcast, the same holds true in an intentional energy session. So All of my social links will be on my website. And the books are called Fall in Love with the Whispers of Your Heart, A Guide to Transformation from the Inside Out. And again, as I was mentioning before, it's a self-guided exploration, allowing yourself to get curious about your inner tapestry and all the parts that are woven together that creates the unique self that you are. And, there are 17 chapters to each book. And it's about feelings, forgiveness. It could be about connection, prayer, spirituality, intuition. So, it covers many, many topics, and it's not sequential. You don't have to read book one before book two. Like, you can read them out of order. You can randomly open a page and be like, oh, look at, this is what I needed today. I needed to read this part on trust. And there's a quote, and then there's some little brain droppings that happen. And then there are reflection questions and a mantra. So you can choose how much or how little you are with that. You can let the questions maybe rumble around in your mind for a while, or you can, whatever. It's totally self-directed, and you can use it how it most aligns with you. So that is my information. I would love if you have questions, comments, concerns, complaints, reach out to me. My email is also on my website. So dive in, get curious. I'd love to walk with you.
Join the walk, people. But seriously, yeah. And again, for anyone who is curious, does want to check out any of the things, there will be links to everything in the show notes. But I can speak from, I had a session with Anne. I've gone through sections of all three of her books. I'm trying to do it what I believe to be the proper way, which is similar to the, I believe, Daily Stoic book, where it's not just you open it and read through. It's each page lies within itself an experience of, you read a poem about an aspect of a topic. There's a quote, there's a journaling prompt, there's all of these things to make sure that you're spending a day, a few days, a week devoted to diving deeper into that aspect of that piece of your life. I highly recommend, if you're someone who is in the spot that I was in and will probably inevitably end up in at some point in the ups and downs of life, where you do feel a little bit detached. You feel like even if you're doing the right things, you're checking all the boxes, there's a piece of you that doesn't feel spiritually and emotionally plugged in. I highly recommend talking with Anne. Kat, who's basically a part-time co-host of this show at this point. If you watch this regularly, you know Kat. She also puts her stamp of approval on this. Reach out, have a conversation, read a book, listen to some piano, have a good time, join the walk. But
yes.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And thank you so much for sitting down, virtually chatting with me here. Before we leave, is there anything else you're like yearning to get out? Anything else you want to tell the people?
Be true to you. Live like your best self. I love it. Like, this is total alignment. Be you all the time. You're a brilliant, unique, fabulous individual. Let your light shine. And thank you, Trevor, so much for having me here. I've loved this conversation. I've loved our time together.
Of course. So here, real quick, now that you just said that, I'm going to pull out a fortune cookie fortune that I just got this morning. To be yourself is the greatest accomplishment.
Yay!
Boom. Let's see,
Nice.
that might be backwards on the recording, but there you go, from the Chinese cookie itself. Be yourself, be your true self. But and thank you, everybody who has gotten to this point, whether this is your first podcast listening to me or you followed along the entire journey. You will learn that at the end of these, I always give props to the people who take time out of their day, out of their lives, to be intentional about listening to conversations like this. Sometimes it's educational, sometimes it's inspirational, sometimes it's just an entertaining getaway that has substance of topics about self, about life, about growth. So thank you so much for being part of the Best Self Squad, the community that follows these things, wants to become the best version of who you are, whatever that means to you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I will go into the best self info, all the upcoming stuff in the show notes. I will let you get on with your day. Until the next one, peace out.